The jealousy of a leash. When the dog you love becomes the danger. You ignore. You know, after 50 years on the bench, first in family court, then in this little television courtroom where millions of people watch me every single day, I've learned that the truth has a smell, it has a weight, it has a consistency that you can feel in your bones when somebody's sitting across from you, spinning their wheels, trying to convince you that up is down and black is white. And let me tell you something about this particular case that walked into my courtroom. The smell of lies was so thick you could have bottled it and sold it as perfume down at the department store. But I'm getting ahead of myself because every good story starts at the beginning. And this one starts on a chilly December afternoon in Pflugerville, Texas, with a 10-year-old boy named Samuel Nunez. Sammy, they call him. Walking home from school with nothing more on his mind than maybe some homework, maybe some video games, maybe whatever 10-year-old boys think about these days when they're not getting their legs torn up by somebody's jealous, neurotic, poorly managed dog. Now, I want you to picture this scene because the way I see it in my mind's eye, and I've been doing this long enough that I can reconstruct a scene better than any detective on television, is that Sammy's walking along Bishopsgate, probably kicking a rock or looking at his phone or doing whatever kids do when they're not paying attention to the world around them. He's 10 years old. 10. That's the age where you're still young enough to believe that adults know what they're doing, that people who have dogs have trained those dogs, that the world operates according to some basic set of rules that keep you safe. And here comes Lourdes Rodriguez, 24 years old, pushing a baby stroller with one hand and holding a leash with the other hand, and on that leash is a white fluffy dog, medium-sized according to Sammy, named Nala or Nola. Honestly, at this point, I don't care what the dog's name is because a dog by any other name would bite just as hard, and this one was about to show its true colors. Now, I want you to understand something about me and dogs. I've had dogs my entire adult life. I've walked dogs in New York City where you've got more distractions and more chaos per square foot than anywhere else in America. I've walked dogs when they were puppies, when they were old and cranky, when they were sick, when they were healthy. I know dogs. I know that a dog on a leash can sense your tension through that leather strap like it's an electrical current. I know that dogs read your body language, your heart rate, your sweat, your everything. And I absolutely know that when a dog is uncomfortable, when a dog is agitated, when a dog is jealous of a new baby in the house, that dog will tell you in 1,000 different ways before it finally tells you with its teeth. The question is whether you're listening. So Sammy's walking, and he sees this woman with a stroller and a dog. Now, Sammy's a polite kid. I could tell that from the moment he opened his mouth in my courtroom, soft-spoken, respectful, looking me in the eye, saying yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, like his mama raised him right. And he notices that the dog is acting funny, the dog is jumping around, the dog is making growling noises, not barking, growling. There's a difference, and any dog person knows that difference. A bark can mean anything from hello to there's a squirrel to I'm excited. But a growl means business. A growl means back off. A growl means I'm uncomfortable and I'm letting you know that the next step is teeth. And here's the part that really got under my skin when I heard it. Lourdes was saying to the dog, don't do it. She was saying it out loud to her own dog as this 10-year-old boy approached. Don't do it. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. If your dog is perfectly fine, if your dog is well-adjusted, if your dog doesn't have a problem with strangers, why are you telling it, don't do it? You don't tell a well-behaved dog not to do something unless you know that doing it is a real possibility. You don't warn a dog against biting unless biting is on the table. And biting was on the table, folks. Biting was the special of the day, and Lourdes knew it. She knew it in her bones, and she did nothing to prevent it. Now, Sammy gets closer. He's trying to be respectful. He's trying to give them space. And Lourdes, according to what she wrote in her sworn deposition, not according to what she told me on the stand, but according to what she signed under penalty of perjury, she directed him to pass on my right side. She directed him. She took control of the situation. She made herself the traffic director of that sidewalk. And Sammy, being a good kid, does what he's told. He goes around. He passes by. He's probably thinking, okay, that's over. I can go home now. But it wasn't over because as he's walking away, as his back is turned, that dog That white, fluffy, medium-sized dog that Lords had been warning not to do it, did it. The dog went around and behind her and bit Sammy on the leg. Now, let's pause here and talk about what that means. A dog that bites someone from behind when they're walking away, when they're not making eye contact, when they're not threatening, when they're not doing anything except existing. That's not a dog that was defending its owner. That's not a dog that was scared. That's a dog that was aggressive. That's a dog that was looking for a reason or making up its own reason to use its teeth. And Lords, according to Sammy, said nothing, didn't apologize, didn't ask if he was okay, didn't exchange information, nothing. She just stood there. Or maybe she kept walking. The story changes depending on which version you believe. And Sammy went home with a bite on his leg. Now, here's where I have to give credit to Sammy's dad, Samuel Nunes. This is a father who did what fathers are supposed to do. His son comes home, says he got bitten by a dog, and instead of just getting angry and letting it go, instead of just taking him to the doctor and forgetting about it, he started asking questions. He started looking. He started searching. And the very next day, December 9th, there was another incident. Another person got bitten by the same dog. And that person, whoever they were, had the presence of mind to report it, to call the police, to make sure that this dog was identified and documented. And because of that second victim, the Pflugerville Police Department was able to connect the dots. They called Samuel Nunes and said, "We think we found the dog that bit your son." That's how you find the truth, folks, by paying attention, by following up, by not letting things slide. Now, let me tell you about the day this case came before me. The courtroom was set up the way it always is. Bailiff Byrd standing there like a mountain of common sense, the plaintiffs on one side, the defendants on the other, and me sitting up here with my glasses on, ready to sort through the mess. Sammy came in with his father, both of them dressed nicely, both of them looking nervous but determined. And Lords came in with her husband, Joe Rivera. And let me tell you something about Joe. He couldn't keep his mouth shut for more than 30 seconds at a time. Every time somebody said something he didn't like, he was interrupting, he was objecting, he was trying to explain, and I had to keep telling him, "Don't interrupt. I know what hearsay is. I've been doing this since before you were born, probably." But he kept at it because that's what people do when they're desperate. They talk and talk and talk, hoping that if they throw enough words at the problem, something will stick. I started with Sammy because I always start with the person who was there, the person who experienced it. And Sammy told me exactly what happened, just like he told his dad, just like he told the police. He was walking home. He saw the lady with the dog and the stroller. The dog was growling. The lady was saying, "Don't do it." He passed by and the dog bit him. 4 shots they gave him, 2 in the arms, 2 in the legs, 4 shots because when you get bitten by a dog, you don't know if that dog has rabies. You don't know if that dog has been vaccinated. You don't know anything except that you have to protect yourself from the worst case scenario. And Sammy, brave little Sammy, took those shots without complaining, without making a fuss, just doing what he had to do to stay healthy. Then I called Lords up to tell her side of the story. And this is where it gets interesting, because Lords had a story all prepared. She came up to the board, you know, the big whiteboard we have in the courtroom where people can draw diagrams, and she started explaining. December 8th, 2 hours in the afternoon, she was walking down Bishopsgate with her dog on the left and the stroller on the right. She saw Sammy coming. Her sister is afraid of dogs, she said, so she knows to be respectful. So she stopped. She stood there. She directed Sammy, not verbally, she was careful to say, but by standing there to go around them. And Sammy passed, and they kept walking. And then her dog started barking after they'd already walked off. And she turned around, and the dog was just barking. And Sammy didn't react. So she pulled the dog back and kept walking. Now, I want you to listen to that story and compare it to what she wrote in her sworn deposition, because the deposition says something very different. The deposition says, "As plaintiff's son approached, I pulled Nala's leash and kept her on my left side. I directed him to pass on my right side. Once he passed, I started walking again. All of a sudden, his son came up from behind us and scared Nala. When he startled us, Nala reacted to protect us." Do you see the difference? In the deposition, Sammy came back. In the deposition, Sammy scared the dog. In the deposition, the dog was protecting them. But on the stand, under oath, in front of me and Bailiff Byrd and everyone watching, that part completely disappeared. It was like it never happened. It was like she forgot that she'd already told a different story to a different person and signed her name to it. And that's when I gave her my famous line, the one that people quote back to me all the time, the one that's true whether you're in my courtroom or in your living room or anywhere else in the world. If you tell the truth, you don't have to have a good memory. Because that's the thing about truth. It's consistent. It doesn't change depending on who's asking or what day it is or how much trouble you're in. Truth is truth is truth. But lies have to be maintained. Lies have to be remembered. Lies have to be adjusted and revised and updated every time a new piece of evidence comes to light. And Lourdes, sitting there in front of me, couldn't keep her lies straight for more than 24 hours, let alone the weeks between the incident and the trial. I asked her about it directly. I said, what part of that deposition didn't you tell me? You signed it, you swore to it, and she tried to wave it away. She said, I just gave you the simple story. Simple story? There's nothing simple about a story that changes completely depending on who's listening. There's nothing simple about a story that adds a whole new element, the child coming back from behind, the child scaring the dog, when it's written down, but drops that element when it's spoken out loud. That's not simple. That's calculated. That's strategic. That's the kind of storytelling you do when you know the truth makes you look bad. So you try to find a version that makes you look better. And let me tell you something about that deposition version. It's actually worse for her, if you think about it. Because in that version, she's claiming that Sammy came up from behind and scared the dog. But Sammy was 10 years old. 10! And he'd already passed them. Why would he come back? Why would he double back to a dog that was growling, that was acting aggressive, that was making him nervous? That doesn't make any sense. That's not what kids do. Kids avoid dogs that scare them. Kids give them a wide berth. Kids don't go back for more. So even that version, the one she signed her name to, doesn't hold water. But at least in that version, she had some kind of explanation, some kind of justification. In the version she told me, there was nothing. Just a dog that barked for no reason and a boy who walked away and no bite at all, apparently, even though the medical records show the bite and the shots and the whole 9 yards. Now, her husband, Joe, kept trying to jump in. He kept trying to talk about the second incident, the one on December 9th, the one that led the police to identify the dog. He wanted to tell me that in that incident, there was a pit bull involved, that the pit bull wasn't on a leash, that it was coming toward his mother-in-law and their dog, that they called 911. And I let him talk eventually, after I told him to wait his turn. But here's the thing about that second incident. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the other dog was off leash. It doesn't matter if the pit bull was aggressive. What matters is that their dog bit somebody. What matters is that their dog, on 2 separate occasions, within 24 hours, used its teeth on human beings. And when a dog does that, the responsibility falls on the owner, not on the circumstances, not on the other dog, not on anything else. I asked Lourdes directly, were you cited once or twice for your dog biting somebody within a week's period? And she said once. She said it was for this child, for Sammy. And I asked about the other incident, and she said nothing came to be of it. The dog was not on a leash, so it was really nothing to be had. Nothing to be had. A dog bite is a dog bite, whether the other dog was on a leash or not. The other dog being off leash doesn't make her dog's teeth any less sharp. It doesn't make the bite any less real. It doesn't make the victim any less victimized. But that's the kind of thinking that gets people in trouble. The kind of thinking that looks for excuses instead of looking for solutions, that blames everyone else instead of taking responsibility. Now, I want to talk about the money, because that's what brings people to my courtroom more than anything else. Sammy's father, Samuel Nunez, had medical bills. He had out-of-pocket expenses. He had time missed from work. He added it all up, and it came to just over $346. That included the medical bills and his missing time from work. But when I looked at the actual medical records, the out-of-pocket portion, the money he actually had to pay, not what the insurance covered, was $300. Now, I could have given him just that $300. I could have said, here's your actual expenses, case closed. But that's not how I do things, and that's not what justice required in this situation. Because here's the thing about damages. They're not just about money. They're about accountability. They're about sending a message. They're about making sure that the person who caused the harm understands that their actions have consequences. And in this case, Lourdes Rodriguez needed to understand that when your dog bites a child, when you lie about it, when you change your story, when you try to weasel out of responsibility, you're going to pay more than just the medical bills. You're going to pay for the pain, for the fear, for the trauma, for the 4 shots that little boy had to get because you couldn't control your animal. So I gave Sammy and his father $2,500, not because that's what the medical bills were, but because that's what the case was worth. That's what justice looked like in that moment. And I want you to understand why I landed on that number, because it's important. The medical bills were part of it, sure. But the bigger part was the principle. The bigger part was the fact that this woman had stood there and watched her dog bite a child and done nothing. The bigger part was that she'd told 2 different stories under oath. The bigger part was that she'd had a second incident the very next day and still didn't seem to understand that her dog was a problem. And that brings me to the most important part of this whole case, the part that kept me up that night thinking about it, the part that I want every person watching to understand. Lourdes had a new baby, a brand new baby, just a few months old, in that stroller. And she had a dog that she'd had for 5 years, a dog that had been her baby before the human baby came along. And I've seen this before, folks. I've lived this before. When you bring a new baby into a house where a dog has been the center of attention for years, that dog's personality changes. That dog gets jealous. That dog gets anxious. That dog gets protective of its territory, its people, its place in the pack. And if you're not paying attention, if you're not managing that transition carefully, you're going to have problems. I asked Lourdes if she still had the dog. She said yes. She said she had pictures of the dog and the baby together, and the dog absolutely loves the baby. And I told her straight that I've seen those pictures before. Every person whose dog has bitten somebody has pictures of the dog being sweet, of the dog being gentle, of the dog being part of the family. But pictures don't tell the whole story. Pictures don't show you what happens when that baby starts crawling, when that baby starts pulling on the dog's fur, when that baby starts invading the dog's space in ways that the dog never signed up for. I said to her, your dog bit this child for no reason. So far, you haven't given me a reason. You've given me 2 different stories, but not one reason. And that's the truth. In all of her talking, in all of her explaining, in all of her drawing on the board and pointing at diagrams, she never once gave me a reason why her dog bit that boy. She never once said, he stepped on the dog's tail, or he made a sudden movement, or he was teasing the dog. She just said the dog barked and the boy walked away. And somehow there was a bite. That doesn't add up. That doesn't make sense. And the only explanation that does make sense is that the dog was aggressive, that the dog was looking for a reason to bite, and that Lourdes knew it but did nothing to prevent it. Now, I want you to think about that baby. I want you to picture that baby, maybe 6 months old, maybe a year old, starting to crawl around the house. And I want you to picture that white, fluffy dog, the same dog that bit Sammy for no reason, watching that baby crawl. Dogs don't think like people think. Dogs don't understand that babies are fragile, that babies are precious, that babies are family. Dogs understand territory and pack and hierarchy and survival. And if that dog felt threatened by a 10-year-old boy walking past on the sidewalk, how's it going to feel when that baby starts pulling its ears? How's it going to feel when that baby grabs its food bowl? How's it going to feel when that baby does any of the 1,000 things that babies do that annoy dogs every single day? I told Lourdes, the truth is, you've been forewarned. And I meant it. I meant it with every fiber of my being, because this wasn't just about Sammy anymore. This was about that baby. This was about the next victim, the one who might not be able to testify, the one who might not be able to say what happened, the one who might end up with scars on their face instead of their leg. I've seen it happen. I've seen too many cases where a dog bites once and the owner makes excuses and the dog bites again, and this time it's worse, and this time it's a child who can't defend themselves, and this time it's a tragedy instead of an incident. Joe, her husband, kept trying to interrupt. He kept trying to say that his wife's story was the same, just more elaborate, more elaborate. Let me tell you something about elaborate stories. They're usually lies dressed up in fancy clothes. The truth doesn't need elaboration. The truth doesn't need to be dressed up. The truth stands on its own, plain and simple and solid. But when you've got 2 different versions of events, when you've got a deposition that says one thing and testimony that says another, When you've got a dog that bites 2 people in 2 days, that's not elaboration. That's contradiction. That's inconsistency. That's the kind of mess that happens when you're trying to cover your tracks and you can't remember where you buried the evidence. I looked at Sammy sitting there with his father, probably wondering what was going to happen, probably hoping that someone would believe him. And I believed him. I believed him because his story never changed. I believed him because he didn't have a reason to lie. I believed him because he was 10 years old, and 10-year-olds don't generally make up stories about getting bitten by dogs and getting 4 shots and having their whole week turned upside down. And I believed him because the evidence backed him up. The medical records, the police reports, the second incident, all of it pointed to the same conclusion. That dog was a problem, and Lourdes was the one responsible for it. So I made my decision. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $2,500, case closed. But here's the thing about cases. They're never really closed, not in the way that matters. Because after the cameras stop rolling, after the gavel comes down, after everyone goes home, that dog is still there. That baby is still there. And Lourdes is still there with her 2 different stories and her pictures of the dog loving the baby and her complete inability to see what's right in front of her face. I hope she listened to what I said. I hope she took it seriously. I hope she understands that being forewarned means being forearmed, that knowing the danger means you have a responsibility to do something about it. But I've been doing this long enough to know that hope isn't a strategy. Hope isn't a plan. Hope is just wishful thinking dressed up in Sunday clothes. And the truth is, some people don't learn until it's too late. Some people have to see the tragedy before they understand the warning. Some people have to lose something precious before they realize what they had. I pray that Lourdes isn't one of those people. I pray that baby stays safe. I pray that Nala or Nola or whatever that dog's name is never gets another chance to use its teeth on someone who can't fight back. But prayers don't prevent dog bites. Prayers don't keep children safe. Only action does that. Only paying attention does that. Only being willing to see the truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable, even when the truth means admitting that your beloved pet has a problem, even when the truth means making hard decisions. Only that keeps children safe. And that's the lesson I hope everyone takes from this case. Not the money, not the drama, not the entertainment. The lesson that when a dog shows you who it is, believe it. When a dog growls, pay attention. When a dog bites, take responsibility. And when a new baby comes into the house, watch that dog like a hawk, because jealousy is a powerful thing, and dogs feel it just as strongly as people do. I've had dogs my whole life. I've loved dogs my whole life. But I've never loved a dog more than I love a child. I've never put a dog's comfort above a child's safety, and I never will. That's the line that some people can't seem to find, the line between loving your pet and protecting your family. Lourdes was standing on the wrong side of that line when she let her dog bite Sammy, and she's still standing on the wrong side of that line if she thinks pictures prove anything. Pictures don't prove that a dog is safe. Only behavior proves that. Only history proves that. Only a track record of nonviolence proves that. And her dog's track record, unfortunately, speaks for itself. So that's the story. That's what happened in my courtroom on that day with that family, with that dog, with that little boy who just wanted to go home from school. It's a story I've seen 100 times in 100 different variations, but it never gets old and it never stops mattering. Because every time a dog bites a child, it's a failure of the owner, a failure of judgment, a failure of responsibility. And every time I have the chance to hold someone accountable for that failure, I do it, not because I enjoy it, but because it's my job. Because someone has to stand up for the children. Someone has to say, this is wrong, and you're going to pay for it. Someone has to be the voice of common sense in a world that's full of excuses and justifications and elaborate stories that fall apart the minute you look at them closely. And that someone in this case was me, Judge Judy, they call me. But really, I'm just a person who's been around long enough to know the difference between truth and lies, between responsibility and blame shifting, between love and enabling. I gave Lourdes the judgment, but more than that, I gave her a warning. I hope she heard it. I hope she acts on it. I hope that baby grows up safe and healthy and never knows what it's like to be bitten by a dog that should have been managed better. But if something does happen, if that dog bites again, I hope someone calls me. I hope they bring the case to my courtroom, And I hope Lourdes remembers this day, remembers what I said, remembers that she was forewarned. Because forewarned is forearmed. And in this case, being forearmed might just save her baby's life.